Gather round. Tyler Nelson's got a story to tell. Tyler is an interesting guy. Not only did he decide to scale and sell in under a year and did it, but he also turned on the faucet in like 9 months, grew 100 plus stores. His stuff did not fall apart. He knew how to kind of scale and make it through the pain and all that good stuff. And now Tyler is the head of account management for Vendoroo, and he's got some ideas I think you should consider from the standpoint of what makes AI safe to trust when you're growing. So tons of lessons in this one on how he grew, how he flipped it. He basically flipped a property management company, and then what he's learning on the other side. Enjoy this conversation with Tyler Nelson. Welcome to the Property Management Frame Breakers podcast. I'm your host, Pablo Gonzalez, and I am here to introduce you to the folks in the property management space that have broken the frame of what you may believe was possible. This podcast is presented by Vendoroo. It is your all-in-one AI solution for resolving your maintenance needs. Let's go. I wanted to talk a little bit about yours and your career. Definitely wanted to hit on kind of like the takeaways from the Human in the Loop webinar and your expertise around AI before even coming to Vendoroo, right? Like that whole like validation of like, you're a property manager that's done this stuff, to me is kind of like a story I want to get out there.
Overall, I went from like when I first started marketing, it was like February of 2024, and I sold the company in December of 2020. Sorry, February of 2024, and I sold the company in December of 2025. And in that time, I added 90 something properties. I peaked in September of 2025. Sorry, 2024. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I peaked at 15 doors in 1 month. It's 10 owners in September of 2024. And I think that was a cool thing to see, but it was also like the most stressful time because it was like, okay, well, now we have 15 vacancies. Most of these were vacant too. So it's like, okay, these all go to vacancies. So how are we going to show
Yeah.
these things? We want to grow, we want to provide a high level of service. Like that was the busiest time of, if you're in growth mode, how do you balance growth with like good service and good expectations and like not faltering on the other things that you have to do as a property management company
Yeah.
and like positioning yourself to kind of do so.
Did you hear that part from Tyler? How do you scale, grow, and not falter on the other things? We're about to get into exactly how he grew and everything that he did. But that piece of not faltering as you grow, that is what an AI teammate solves for you. It keeps a high, consistent floor for the defined activities that you know have to happen every day, all the time, no matter how big you are, that take up about 80-85% of the things that you do. Your AI teammate is able to keep that consistent while you grow without burning your team out, without losing this like high floor of quality as you grow and taking your eye off the ball so that you can keep it on growth. Check this episode out. You're going to love Tyler, but do yourself a favor. Get an AI teammate to handle that stuff for you. If you're in growth mode, go to vendoroo.ai and check it out. When you say you started marketing in February 2024, you mean like you had a property management company, then you like specifically went into growth mode and started marketing, and then you added 90 doors in 10 months?
Yeah, so I kind of I became like an accidental property manager where I personally own 20 units across a couple states. And so I worked at a prop tech company before, and when interest rates skyrocketed, kind of the floor kind of fell out of their pipeline. And so since home sales weren't happening, they basically depended upon home sales and home purchases in order to have their, and for that to be competitive for their product to make sense. But since that kind of went away, it halted the growth and halted kind of the product market fit. And I went through 3 rounds of layoffs. I had to facilitate 2 of them. And so it was basically kind of like soul crushing. And then because I was the one managing like the business side of it, I was like,
Uh,
the next logical step is me. And I like to be I like to dictate my own destiny as much as possible. And so, yeah, left that in September of 2023, started the property management company in October of 2023 because I had to get like licensed and all that fun stuff. And then like started getting like processes in place, like systems in place, like started figuring out kind of how I wanted it to look before I just like went for it. Like tested a few PMSs. I knew I didn't want to go the franchise way because I wanted to like be able to dictate my own thing. And at the very beginning, I was like, oh, I'm just gonna grow this thing forever into the future. So like I might want to franchise it one day. And so I ended up getting my first client, which was a referral from like a real estate agent friend in November of 2024. And then added like two in November, two in
November
December.
2023, right? Because we talked about, yeah. All right, continue, continue.
November 2023.
Yeah. Yeah.
2020 started throwing me off. Yeah, so November 2023. And then wanted to really find a good, like my whole thing was I wanted to find the right point solution for me at the stage I was in, but that I could grow with too.
Uh-huh.
Some of those I got wrong. Like I used one PMS at one point, and then it just there were things I really liked about it, but there were a couple things that ended up being more frequent pain points that it didn't do very well. So I ended up actually transitioning PMSs in June. So like while I was growing, adding 5 to 10 doors a month and like having vacancies and adding a team, transition to property management system too. So I got basically a crash course in like all the things you could possibly do as a property manager. And then as a part of that, I wanted to find like the right marketing spend an avenue for me. And so I didn't like like I'm not good at SEO. I'm not good at like and then also like I was a new company, so I knew getting on like Google ads and like stuff was gonna be very difficult. And then it has to be like looked at and managed and optimized. So I actually just bit the bullet and paid. They like are specific to the property management industry. They only work with a couple of people per market so that you get good quality leads. And my like just raw lead to conversion was about 30 to 40% out of that one channel.
Mhm.
And so I could dictate the spend on there. So I was like, hey, if I got capacity, I'm just going to ramp up the spend and dial that in and out. I end up using like an aggregator called All Property Management. And in my area, it was like too competitive of leads to where like my conversion dropped to about like less than 10%. So I was paying 50% of what I was paying of like the high end one, but I was converting the other one three times more. And so it made a lot more sense for me to like double down in that area.
In the aggregator instead of like the boutique service.
No, the boutique one, it made more sense because
Okay, cool.
I was closing three times more and it
Yeah.
only cost as much. So I was actually making more money in the long run without chasing my bill as much. I did find that the aggregator actually was able to get me more multifamily, like really good multifamily leads. And so I ended up figuring out which point solution and avenue is like the best to grow in certain areas. So I was like doing the best with my dollars. It was an expensive it was an expensive trial, like trying to experiment that I did over the course of like 45 days, but ultimately it ended up being worth it because then the month after that was my lowest marketing spend with my highest amount of doors added.
Awesome. Okay. Do you feel comfortable telling me what the point solutions were that you iterated through? Like you started with one and went to another, or do you not want to kind of like put anybody on, like you want to just kind of like talk through that?
Yeah, I'll talk through it. I don't
Okay.
really want to put any of our
Yeah.
the people that work with now on blast, but like my experience was I started basically just with the PMS and I started with door loop
Uh-huh.
was my first one that I really liked.
Uh-huh.
And then I had looked at like Buildium, looked at Appfolio, looked at Tenant Cloud as well as another opportunity. And then my website was actually through PMW, which is Property
Uh-huh.
Management Sites, which is a sister company of Rentvine. But I was getting like a little too antsy and didn't actually go down the path of Rentvine at the time. And so like Door Loop was the one like I really liked like their integrations, like open API. Like I actually went into it with the idea of an open API as well, if I wanted to integrate different point solutions later, since I come from a tech background and knew kind of what that meant and entailed. So I wanted flexibility in whichever path I used without having to like pay more. And so started with Door Loop kind of by itself. And then kind of like with any like business manager, like at the beginning, I was just growing. And anytime I had like positive cash flow, I would like get the new tool or get something else in place before I grew too fast and it was too hard. So I like zero it out and just be like cash flow neutral for a little bit and then slowly like build the tools and the sets. So that took me about like 9 months to like kind of getting some cash, leveling it out, getting cash,
Yep.
leveling it out. And so when I really started seeing like the path towards like real profitability for how I was pricing and how I was operating at the time, because I was wanting to be pretty big, is it took me about 75 doors. So up until that point, I was pretty much grinding like basically paying myself minimum wage and then
Yeah.
putting everything back into the business. And in May, I switched to Rentvine because they had some integrations that were out of the box that of platforms I liked. I ended up starting using Lead Simple because you can only do spreadsheets for lead tracking for for so long, and then started really building out like the workflows behind like, hey, tenant calls in, who does it route to? By March, I had a fully dedicated VA that was helping with everything but like billing. She was taking in sales leads, like qualifying them, setting them up on my calendar so I didn't have to do that piece. She would help me like follow up with like vendors or owners if they had some questions. Her name was Marga. She was amazing. And then by the time I switched to Rentvine, I had Lead Simple in place and then integrated with Rentvine. And then I also at the same time started Show Mojo as well because I wanted there to be like self showings. Like I was setting this up to be like as remote managed as possible from the beginning. Like I knew that's what I wanted. And so I did research into like what all the point solutions were. I tested out multiple smart locks. Some were better than others, and some allowed for different functionality than others as well. And ended up just going with Show Mojo because everything was all integrated together. And then I didn't actually find like a really solid showing and like leasing support kind of flow at the time that I liked. So I actually got, God, what were they called? I forget what they were called, but I ended up finding a service that was like it's like $250 a lease, and they would do everything. So new tenant inquiry, application, vetting, like everything across the board, and like deliver them on a silver platter, all integrated like through my system. So they worked in my platform, but I knew it was like fixed cost is like a part of like what it was going to cost per lease. So I could like bake that in to my overall like cost structure. And that was super helpful because then I didn't have to have people following up with like random tenants. It wasn't a matter of hours spent. It was just success based. It's kind of when David talks about fixed cost scaling, it's like, okay, if I add 10 more properties and I need to fill them all, I know I'm gonna have to spend $2,500 on. I started looking at things as in that same way. I didn't have the name for it like David does, but I started looking at it that way of how can I scale with a very predictable cost structure so then I can also be super competitive in the market. This is going to be something that people across the industry probably won't agree with, but I come from like the owner side is how I kind of fell into it. And when I look at properties, I think that and what I've experienced myself is that the lower rent and like lower income areas are generally the most work. And then you get these high end properties that like are really well kept up, don't have a lot of maintenance issues. Tenants are fine. They don't want to be bothered. Like they just sail off on their own. And so there's this weird kind of positioning in the property management industry, which is you work the hardest for the least amount of money and you work the least for the most amount of money. And so when I went to market, I was like, hey, I want to be kept out of all the BS. And I want to position myself so it makes a lot of sense for people that have higher rents because I know I'm gonna have to spend the least amount of time on them. And so I did flat fee across the board for both leasing and for monthly management fees. And that was my pricing structure. And so if you looked at like in Denver, I was getting some properties that were renting for $4,000 a month. That was roughly 6%. Like with my flat rate pricing was about 6%. But if you looked at the average market rents of Denver, I was about at like 9.25%. So for the average rent, I was right in the mix of where people were at. But then when you start looking at the nicer, more easily managed properties, like I was a lot better positioned to win those just from a pricing perspective. And then it kept me out of like the areas I didn't want to be in because they'd see like my pricing online. They'd see like a initial response back like, hey, here's a breakdown of our pricing. They'd be like, nope, I'm out because that's like 15, 16, 20% of my rent. So I can go to someone else.
Yeah, that's interesting, man. I hadn't thought about it as like, I had not thought about the flat fee pricing model as a way to incentivize higher rent properties and de-incentivize lower rent properties. That's really, really interesting. Is that something people talk about? Like, did you learn that on your own, or did you kind of like get that advice from somebody of this idea of just kind of like that flat fee would drive that behavior?
Yeah, so it was something that I tested on myself. That was kind of a gut feeling that I had going into it. I had owned my portfolio for over a year at this point, and it was one thing that like kind of consistently bugged me because I had some properties that were like lower end as I was getting into it, and then end up like getting a nicer like 4 unit fourplex in like a decent city. Like never has any issues compared to some of my other properties, but they're making less on the other properties that they're having to spend a lot more time on. And then I'm also getting frustrated as an owner saying like you never have any maintenance work orders. These tenants always renew. They've been there for 4 years. Like you're not having to spend a lot of time, energy, and effort on this. Like, why am I paying more for this service over here when you're actually spending a lot more time, energy, and effort over here? And so just like interacting with property managers from like through my own portfolio, that I was like, this could be an interesting assumption and like to challenge. And so I started it off that way. And I was like, if this doesn't work, if this doesn't make any sense, I can always change to a percent-based pricing model, like everybody else, and compete on service. But I was like, I think this could be something that helps me win over a decent amount.
Interesting. Interesting. All right. Talk to me about the so if we're going back to the beginning of the story then, right? So you started in like late summer of 2023. You kind of like figured out your tech stack, you figured out your processes. February 2024, you wanted to market and grow, and then you sold in December of 2020. I guess it was
Cool.
2024, right? Because we're now,
2024.
yeah. Okay, cool.
I had it for over a year total.
Over a year. So that sounds like flipping a company essentially, right? Like
Yeah.
that's
It ended up being like that. I didn't start it off that way. I
yeah.
wanted it. I was like, hey, I can grow this business. Like my cousins are in like real estate development and things like that. And at the time, I just had my first son. I was like, hey, like they're in the family business. Like that's super nice to like have kind of control and like be able to like work with your family. So I was like, oh, if I build this company and it goes well, like I can just like if he wants to do it, great. If he doesn't, I can always sell it. But like at least there's a space kind of for him that can provide like a path to success too. And then in the fall of 2020, ended up being a really weird kind of thing that happened. I ended up in like completely separate from the company. I ended up investing in a med tech like AI company, and they ended up wanting me to come in as like a chief strategy officer for them. And I was like, this is kind of like that was kind of like my dream. Like I came up through
Sounds cool.
consulting. Yeah, I came up through consulting, did huge tech transformations at a couple companies before, and like it was a really, really cool opportunity. And basically found out that like after I joined and I was already under like contract to like sell the company and like get out and like it was a done deal, that like the finances were all faked and like the whole bottom fell out. So I had in December 31st of 2024, I sold my company. February 10th, that new company went bankrupt. So now I'm like, what do I do now? Kind of
Oh,
thing.
wow. Okay.
Um, it was, and then like that meant like the money I invested in that company like went to zero overnight too. So I'm in like this, sold my company, like in between stage. What do I do now? Like all that investment's gone. Took a minute to kind of think about like what I wanted to do next, and then yeah, landed in AI consulting was basically what I ended up doing. I was like, if I can build another company, why not just do that?
Interesting. Interesting. All right, cool. So I want to get a couple more lessons from like the property management scale up. Then I want to go a little bit into the AI consulting, what you learned in the scale up, right? Like in the 90 plus properties in 10 months. Tell me about kind of like how you shucked and jived in order to like not break while that was happening. Like what is the like just give me some lessons learned there of like what you had to figure out there to make it through that.
Yeah. So I guess one of the things that allowed it to be so successful, but also a mistake that I made looking back on it is I've never viewed myself as like a salesperson. Like I hate cold calling. Like I don't like to do it. I'm not gonna like be a huge like networker or like referral generator, like things like that, just based off of like initial call or like initial relationship. I'm the farmer. Like that once they come into the domain, like once I introduce you, once I meet you, or like once you work with me, like things can expand. But I didn't know that up front. And so I was like, hey, I'll do all like the maintenance and like the operation side of things. So I'll bring on like people to help on the sales side. So, but what ended up happening is I was closing most of the deals, like being most successful, but then I had this gap on the operation side. So that was one lesson learned. But ultimately, like we were able to scale a little faster because I had me and another kind of sales guy helping out too with the leads that were coming in. Our time to fill was still under like 30 days. It was around 21 days from when we took over a contract to filling it with a tenant. So still pretty solid in our area at the time. But it definitely like you don't know with ramping up that fast, like things just break. And
Yeah.
so it's definitely one of those things where you don't know what you don't know at the time. And then when you find out what you didn't know, needing to course correct and like figure and like fix it. And
Yeah.
so like there are
I mean,
multiple
that's
times.
that's
Yeah,
the
go ahead.
opposite of fixed cost scaling, right? Like that's kind of like what we're talking about when it comes to like if I'm understanding it correctly, right? Like the idea of like as you grow, being able to predict kind of like what your costs will be in relation to the thing that you got to do and your gross profit versus what you just described, or are we talking about two different things?
So one is like fixed cost scaling is like what I'm bringing in and what it costs me to bring things in. What I was talking about is like your actual processes that just break, like they just shatter because now you've been like what was working when you were at 50 doors is not necessarily going to work when you're 100 doors. And what I was doing at 100 doors, I could, with talking to our other clients that are at 500 or 1,000 doors, like there's absolutely no way that those things would be working at that point too. And so you want to be able to scale in a way that is predictable from like the cost structure, but also recognize that things are going to break. Like you're going to reach a limit to what your current process and current structure can maintain and handle. And then
Mhm.
you need to be ready to identify that and like see it coming and then pivot and or fix it in the meantime. So like for example, an easy like the easiest one I think about is you're changing from a solopreneur to an entrepreneur with like a basic team. Like not everybody's going to be doing the same things. If you have everybody doing the same things, then you're going to step on each other's toes. You're going to not know who's doing what, who's like truly owning something, or you're also just not going to optimize for certain areas. Like once you start getting to that kind of 100 door mark, like it makes sense that you have somebody or an area more focused on maintenance. You have somebody more focused on sales. Like you have somebody more focused on maybe like owner communications. Like you're now starting to like specialize and like revamp your processes. And so that's like what I'm talking about, like internal process. Like you may have all the tools in place, so your cost structure doesn't actually change, but how
Mhm.
you have to operate has to change.
Got it. And is that, I mean, is it always a personnel thing? Like, is it always like kind of like the limit of the person that what can do it? They need a new process because now they're not aware of what like the new thing is. Like, just give me a little more detail on that.
Yeah, not always. So I had the two same people. Like Margo was amazing, had her all the way through the end. She was a VA in the Philippines. Actually gave her like a bonus like percentage of like the company sale, which was fun to see her reaction from that. But it's more like sometimes you don't understand the limitations of a tool in the moment. Like pressure testing is very difficult with technology. Like any technology that's out there, like it's very difficult to understand. Like, okay, if I put 10 tests through this, is that a representation of how this is always going to work? Or if now I put 1,000 through this at the same time, is this now going to break? And that's kind of what happened when I initially went like started with door loop is I started getting to the point where there was a specific piece of volume and pain point that was happening that it made sense for me to change. Like they had the fix on their roadmap. It just like wasn't in like the next year. And I was like, I can't deal with this for a year. But I told them, I was like, if you ever fix this, like I'm coming back. And so like things like that. So that's why I changed PMS is because I ended up getting to a point where there was something that wasn't working at that volume for me. So I had to switch. I had
Yeah.
to switch to same thing I see a lot with like CRMs. Like Lead Simple is a super powerful tool. I never got it to break, but there may be a point where it ends up breaking and you need something more powerful like a HubSpot that's just more built out, more robust. Like you have a lot different, it's a lot more flexible and like integrates a lot differently than something like a Lead Simple. And like different industries use it because of that reason. Like you don't see real estate agents using Lead Simple. You see them using what's theirs called. They have a very specific one that's like well known and like everybody uses it because it's built specifically for them. And so you see the same thing as you get bigger is like the tools that are solutions for property managers are actually like marketed to different size companies as well. Like some of the property management systems like Appfolio versus Buildium, Properware, Rentvine, like some of them have minimums. They're like, hey, we're not even going to worry about smaller
Yeah.
than this because our solution doesn't make sense for that size of operation. But then once you get to that inflection point, the solution that you're on may not make sense anymore. And so it's that consistent learning and changing and like optimizing for the space that you're in. And the more you want to grow, the more you're going to see that. Like if you're like, hey, my goal is 150 properties, and once I get there, like I'm just going to coast and like and chill and like this is where I want to play. The product suite that you're picking up when you're at 50 doors is probably going to be pretty similar. But if you're like, hey, like I want to be the biggest beast in the world, and now I'm going to be in Denver, I'm going to be in LA, I'm going to be in New York, like now, and then you're going to different markets. So like now I want to franchise. Like
Mhm.
you're the product suite that you're going to need to do that is going to be very different than the team that's doing 100 doors.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So then you grew to, if you added 90 plus properties through December 2024, what was like your total property count by the time that you sold it?
So a mix between like tenant placement only, so just like leasing and then full management, it was like 96 or 102 like actual signed contracts that went to fruition, like right around
Tenant
there.
tenant placement. So did you run the tenant placement piece as like its own business or was it part of the property management business, right? Because I had is it Brad? Oh, man, I'm blanking on his name, right? But we had a past client that had basically like ran the tenant placement business. It's its own business, and that kind of filtered for the property management business and allowed him to like essentially liquidate the client acquisition. Is that kind of like how you thought of that?
I saw it more as like when I'm growing, I have excess time and capacity. So might as well do it. When I got to like the peak month in September, I didn't take on any tenant placement ones because like the lifetime value of that client is a lot less. And so it was more of like a people are coming asking for this service. I'm not doing anything else. So I might as well get the cash, which will help fuel the growth in the future that I can spend on marketing, I can spend on hiring people, that I can spend on like growing it out. And a couple of those actually turned out to be referrals for others that ended up being full like property management like clients too. That's another thing. Like always been a big fan of like never say no to a conversation. Like you don't know where it's going to lead, both like in business and just in life. I've made a lot of really interesting connections and like paths in my career just because I didn't say no to like an initial conversation with somebody that randomly reached out on LinkedIn. So that's kind of just how I approached it. But yeah, once we got up to like capacity, like I was taking those on less and less because they can be those that want like the tenant placement, like they generally just want like the highest possible rate, but don't understand like the market. And then they're like, oh, this will just be fine. So like it's a lot of high stress up front without a lot of control. And one thing that I was very adamant about too was if I'm doing tenant placement, I'm basically sourcing like tenants for you. I'm not making the decision because I don't want any repercussions on the back end. So like
Yeah.
I'm not making the placement decision. They're not signing my lease. I'm basically connecting you two together. Yeah.
Interesting. Interesting. I was talking about Ben Jacobs and I couldn't remember his name because I was just listening to a founders podcast with Brad Jacobs and I knew that wasn't his name and that was who was coming for me. Anyways, it's Ben. It seems like you sold your property management company really quickly. Like how did you just like wake up one morning and sell it the next day kind of thing? Like what was the lessons learned on kind of like selling the property management company once you realized that you wanted to do something else? Is there anything there?
Yeah, so I'm a pretty like obsessive person when it comes to doing the best I possibly can be, and I was getting to that point of okay, I'm at this inflection point. Like to me, 100 doors was kind of an inflection point of I'm either going to do this for a few more years and like get it to three, four, 500 before I even think about selling, which means I'm hiring another person, and am I like truly committed to like wanting like this life, this company, like these things. And throughout that year, I had multiple like health issues that were completely unrelated, like surgeries and things like that. So when I was looking at my family versus this thing that I'm growing, I made the decision of like, hey, I'd rather dedicate my time, energy, and effort to like this other area of my life. And so I decided to sell it. I did reach out to, and the reason that I was like, that's the inflection point is you go essentially from like a 2x EBITDA multiplier to like at 100 doors to the next cutoff is like 250 doors, then it's like three. But then once you get to 500 doors, it's like six, it could be 6 to 10x. And so
Mhm.
you're starting to, you get a very significant jump between door counts and longevity of business. So I was basically signing up for the next 3 years if I didn't do it, if I didn't sell at that point. And so I ended up deciding to sell it. I talked to a couple like business brokers, but I had thought about growing through acquisition as well. And when I was looking at doing that, it was hyper competitive. Like it was almost impossible. Like you'd reach out to somebody like, yeah, like we already got like somebody else lined up. Like it's like we're already far down the pipeline with these discussions and conversations. And so when a couple of the business, God, what do they call them? Like a business advisors, like the people who
Entrepreneur
help
through acquisition?
no, yeah, the acquisition people
Yeah.
like Trans America, like or
Yeah.
yeah, Trans Advisors and a couple others, like the people that help you sell the company. They were like, hey, like we just don't know if like there's enough on the bone here to like end up selling it that like it makes it worth it for them. And I was like, hey, totally fine. And like maybe I was at the point where like I couldn't, so I was either shut the business down and give up everything that I work for, or like try to sell it myself. I ended up putting together the package myself, marketed it myself, and in 5 days, I had 90 inquiries, one contract, and 6 letters of intent.
Get
Like
out
it
of
was,
here.
it was absolutely insane. So like and I've talked to a couple of our clients at Vendoroo about this too. Like the market for property management is very active. And so like if you're trying to sell, like at least like in the Denver area, like it was, I
Yeah.
had some of the franchise companies like reaching out. I had individuals reaching out. One of our current clients actually right now was somebody that tried to buy mine, which was kind of cool to see. And so yeah, so I ended up wasn't expecting that. Like it
Yeah.
was a Wednesday night at like midnight. I pressed go and I woke up Thursday morning with like 20 inquiries. I was like,
I mean,
what
is
is
it just like websites that you put this like package on that like, like if I'm a property manager, I hadn't even thought about this idea of like listing it for myself. Like, is the packet essentially like a short-term presentation of kind of like business dynamics and like a snapshot of a P&L kind of thing and a couple of slides and then you put it onto a website and voila, like a dating site?
Yeah, basically. So it's the one I use is Biz Buy Sell. Like for those people that have like bought or sold business before, it's one of the top ones for small businesses. Pretty much anything under about 2 million is generally on it. After that, then you really start getting into like putting like real professional services behind it. But there's a lot of business that just transact straight through it. And so yeah, I put together the P&L for last year, projections, said like basically like all help transition. So there's a transition period. There's like a clawback clause too. It's like an early company, like they're concerned about like contract value. So there was a clawback period there as well, which is pretty standard actually across most property management acquisitions. It's like if you lose in 6 months, if you however many clients you lose, they get back X amount of $1,000 per client. So like
Mhm.
it de-risk them overall. And yeah, so I put that on the market first or second week of November, and it fully closed December 31st.
Interesting. Did you also, once you had all this interest, did you go get a lawyer? Like, did you go get some like expert advice to also kind of like doula that thing for you once you had all the interest, or did you just kind of raw dog it yourself?
So I had a lawyer relationship because of the company I was supposed to go work for. So
Uh-huh.
like he was an M&A lawyer. So I
Okay.
started working with one of the first people that expressed interest. They were acquisition focused, so they had a lawyer like on retainer and like provided with their like standard contract. So it was an easy place for to start, which was nice. So I don't have to shell out for like the contract to start. And then just pretty much negotiations. I'm a big fan of like doing things by like your word and like being able to just like converse with
Yeah.
somebody and like people be on the same page. And at that level too, like it was simple enough to get it done. Like we're not talking about insane life-changing money here in
Yeah.
a span. It was enough to make it worth it, but also like very worth it for whoever took over the company too. Like it was like projected like 30% returns, 35% returns. So for someone who's already in the business and just wants to expand their portfolio, like that's a pretty solid return.
Yeah. Yeah. Dude, that's a badass story, man. Like I had no idea that you did that in like that short amount of time. That's an entire lifetime of business in 1 year kind of thing of what you
I was
did there.
exhausted by the end of it.
Dude, that's crazy. That's
Because
cool,
yeah,
man. All right.
like,
Let's talk about your AI consulting days. So then you go into this like short-term kind of like thing in this company, ends up being a fugazi, and you're like, all right, I'm gonna do AI consulting. Were you doing AI consulting for property management companies?
no, actually not at the beginning. I didn't even think about it, to be completely honest,
Yeah.
at the time. So I was going through one of the biggest AI projects I did previously was back in 2019 and wrapped up in mid 2020 for what is now the world's largest physical security provider. And we used machine learning and AI. The four of those were like buzzwords to completely overhaul and revamp the hiring process. And so we went from about 1,500 hires per week to 3,000 hires per week with only needing two additional recruiters. So that was like my main experience and something that I could talk to, like of as far as success. So I went to the like staffing and recruiting agency is saying like, hey, like I've done this in the past. Like I know what you guys are trying to do. I understand like candidate profiles, I understand like throughput and velocity and like how you want to categorize these things. So I went that way just because I had the most experience there. And generally, that industry has more cash to burn on something like that than a property management company. Like the margins are higher, it's
Uh-huh.
lower stakes, things like that. So I focused there first. But I did forget to mention that once I was selling my company, like I started getting the Vendoroo ads. And I was like, oh, if I wasn't selling my company, like this is what I would be doing. Is I would be using this. And so yeah, I ended up working in the recruiting and staffing like agency world for about 5 months. And that's where my detest for cold calling and where I have a tremendous respect for salespeople, SDRs, and all that that just pick up the phone and are willing to roll the dice and take a chance on whatever comes at them from the other end of the line. That's where I was like, hey, this isn't for me. And so I thought about kind of hiring and like building out like a formal sales team on that side. But I was getting to the point where I actually really missed, like at this point, I've been working by myself for about 2 years. And I missed being a part of like a bigger group, like surrounded by like really smart people that like we can bounce ideas off each other, just like the
Yeah.
camaraderie aspect of it.
Yeah.
Um, and so ended up seeing a post like looking for people on LinkedIn. I was like, I'm going to take the
Yeah.
full time.
Looking for founders. Was it like the founder ad?
That one, yes. And so I was
Yeah.
like, I'm gonna actually take all the time to fill this out as not a a quick apply one, but like a do the full thing. And a week later, I ended up at Vendoroo.
That's cool. That's cool. I think that's something that we don't talk enough about. Like I feel like I mention it as often as I can. The idea that the leadership team at Vendoroo is a bunch of like founders because we specifically recruited people saying like founders wanted, right? Like so it's like all people that started companies, whether it's you that started a property management company or me that had my own marketing agency or Daniel who had his own like technology company, right? Dave, like everybody, right? Like it's all a bunch of founders and people that are entrepreneurs that decided to come together for exactly what you just said, a room full of really, really smart people doing some really big stuff. From the technology standpoint, right? So now you're coming from like you're an operator that you're like, oh, I would totally consider this as a product to somebody that's been tinkering with AI things and AI processes. Can you tell me like when you looked behind the scenes and kind of like what the technology was doing and what it's going to do, kind of any kind of aha moments that you had around it?
For Vendoroo specifically?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the major aha moment for me is it's the obsession with like the customer experience. And occasionally we would get pigeonholed like the property manager is our client and their customers. Like how do we better them? But ultimately, and this was something that I struggled with like reconciling when I had my property management company is you have multiple clients. And now that we've
Same
stepped
here.
into maintenance space, property managers are our clients, owners are our clients, and tenants are our clients and customers. And so, how do you actually like obsess over each one of those when they might also have competing priorities? Like owners want to minimize cost and minimize the amount of work orders they're doing. Property managers want to keep owners and tenants happy. Tenants want everything done and they want it done right away. And everybody wants to be kept in the loop. So, and then, oh, I forgot. Then also vendors are our customer too. So, like we now have this very interesting thing that's not just B2B, B2C, where you have one point customer, one point client, and like one core like profile or like ICP. It's like we work with property managers, but then we get to have relationships with these other parties, whether indirectly or directly. And that's what makes it very interesting and challenging. And so when I look at a lot of solutions and like products, whether that's in this industry or others, recognition of like whose lives you're actually trying to impact outside of just like your core ICP, I think is very illuminating because it also opens up a lot of possibilities for what your product can do and what it should be as well. And when I saw that like those were the threads that were starting to be pulled and also just the sheer capabilities from like when I joined, I was like, wow, this thing is shocking. Like I hadn't seen anything like it before. I hadn't seen like other ones in the space do anything close to it as far as what was trying to be pushed on the technological side. But when you balance pushing the frontier with having the customer in mind, you're also not going to try and move too fast because you don't want to leave the customer in the dust. And so that's when you can do both and do both of them well, you get a cool environment where like it's growing, you get feedback, there's frustrations, but you're ultimately moving in the right direction and starting to see some of those wins like coming in from clients. Like there's nothing cooler than walking through and training your AI, like your AI with a client, and then 2 days later they get a work order on the topic that you trained it on and it does it flawlessly. And it's like, wait, this is amazing. Like I didn't have to send a vendor. Like this did it exactly as I wanted to. Like that specific example was a garbage disposal.
Yeah.
Like we were just using garbage disposals as an example of how to train the AI. And we were like walking through, like, hey, these are your base ones. They're like actually like in our area in our homes, they're a little older, so they actually like function this way a little differently. So can we add a couple of these questions? And it was like particularly like where the reset button was, like a little more safety, like oriented questions. And 2 days later, they emailed me and said, "Hey, like we just got a work order in, and it troubleshot the whole garbage disposal, start to finish. Had them unplug it, check if there was like obstructions, reset it, plug it back in. Like walked them step by step, told them where the button was because they said they couldn't find it. Like gave them formal instructions, and it ended up fixing it. Like this is so seeing the capability of like actually not as a developer, not as an account manager, not as like head of operations, like impacting a product, but as an actual customer, being able to do that is super cool in my mind. Like, how many products do you know that are out there that like you as a consumer can interact with it and change and better your experience based on what you specifically want? Like, there's not that many, and I think that level of customization that like Vendoroo and like AI in general can provide offers very different and very cool opportunity in the world of like supporting businesses and like especially like small businesses and large businesses like and they can all be in different stages and phases and can change it at any time to meet them where they're at.
It's something honestly, man. I'm so conditioned over to the side of like being inside of Enderoo for the last two, right? Like I don't have like I wasn't like an AI consultant before this. I wasn't using property management software, right? I was hype man for a property management company, but it's something that you really opened my eyes up to. Like this the and I just heard it yet right before our call on our growth meeting, kind of like talking about the big differentiators being this level of customization that you're able to do with the AI, right? Like, and you opened my eyes up to it when we're putting together that human in the loop presentation, and you're talking about like a y-axis that goes from low complexity to high complexity, and an x-axis that goes from low automation to like high automation, and it being directly inversely proportional, right? Like the complexity to automation, it's either low automation, high complexity, or high automation, low complexity. But the idea that we're like off the chart, off to the right of like high complexity, high automation, because of the ability to customize the little things that when most people think of a technology or think of a software, they think of, well, I need to put in a ticket. And it's kind of like the experience that you were just talking to us about with when you were switching property management systems. You're like, I need this functionality. I have to like put in a ticket for it. They got to tell me when it's on the roadmap, and then I've got to be okay with like waiting for it versus going in there and talking to like an AI that's really yours and telling it the particularities of your operation or your housing stock or the talent of like your different vendors, and being able to be really really specific about like, yeah, this guy's a plumber but he's also actually pretty good at like troubleshooting an HVAC system, so like you might be able to use him for both. And those kinds of things are all things that have really started to dawn on me as why it's such a differentiator. And I wonder kind of like your calls, right? Like you're now what's your title? You're the head of account management now? Is that the deal?
Yeah, I'm still kind of head of operations,
Head of
doing a lot of
operations.
strategic projects to both externally and internally like impact the client experience. So,
Yeah.
like I talked about with the growing company, like sometimes your previous processes break, your previous systems
Yeah.
break. Like we're growing too. That doesn't. It's not just property management companies. It's all sorts of companies out there as well. So, like as we're leveling up and we're growing, it gives us opportunity to bring in different tools that maybe weren't as accessible to us in the past of how we operate ourselves, which now we have the opportunity to do so, which is super exciting for us, and we can only do it with all of our amazing clients. So I'm focusing on that side of things as well, and then
Right on.
also how do we, with a really big component of it being how do we better, how do we enable our clients to have the best like client experience, like not
Yeah.
what we're finding now is these internal metrics we're starting to look at is how are we gauging, are we gauging engagement in are we evaluating engagement in the right way? Like, is just using a product mean that you are off to the races, good to go, like you're happy, or are there different nuances in that? And you have, and kind of what we're finding is you have these kind of two different worlds in like property management is property managers are they generally don't want to deal with maintenance, and that's like what our solution is. But at the same time, they want to offload it, but still have an insane amount of control. Like
Yeah.
they never want to feel like they're out of control in the situation that they're in, because that's not a fun spot to be in when all of a sudden like a work order goes wrong and like owner's mad at you, tenant's mad at you, you're like, well, I had no idea this was happening. And so we are evaluating and working on for a person that wants to have all the control in the world, but very little input. What does that need to look like? And what does success look like in that world? Because you could have, like, for example, one thing we're looking at is we're trying to find a correlation between like client success and like customization. And like that's not really matching right now. And what we came to realize is some clients like really like it out of the box, works well for them. And so they don't need a customization, but they're like, hey, I'm happy. Don't touch it. Leave me alone. But then you see other clients like, actually, like this has to go and be done this way. But if they don't customize it, they're frustrated. So you could actually have low customization and happiness, and you could have low customization and frustration. So how do you identify that and bridge that gap so we're actually helping our clients as much as possible and meeting them where they're at to help them be successful. So that's what I've been working on a lot this week specifically is and then from there, like how do we educate more? How do we teach more? Like how do we give people
Yeah.
the resources they need to kind of do it themselves as well instead of having to talk to somebody internally? Like that piece is what we're finding is when you have to go to an account manager, when you have to go to a product person, when you have to like submit that ticket, you're giving up control. And so how do we give all the resources and easy tooling to our clients so that they always feel that they're in control, can find the information, can direct their AI, and can learn what they need to learn at any moment at the touch of their fingertips.
Sounds easy, man. You must have plenty of free time.
Uh,
All right. So where I was gonna go with it. So how do you? I mean, you're basically saying you want everybody to have their cake and eat it too, like whenever they want it. And I would love to understand. I would love to explain this idea of like the human in the loop thing, right? Like this idea that the more customizable the AI needs to be, and the more that there's like edge cases, the more that the oversight needs to be thought through deliberately is something that you just presented on that I would love to kind of like I don't think people understand that there's like the AI that does it. There's an AI that checks the AI, and then there's a human that checks the AI checking the AI. Can you kind of just explain that kind of relationship?
Yeah, for sure. I guess a good place to start is like when you hire a new employee, say you hire a leasing agent,
Yeah.
there's a specific lease that you need them to follow and put into every single property once you actually onboard a new tenant. You're not just gonna say like, "Hey, come on board, here's the template, go have fun." Like you're actually gonna say, "Well, on all these 10 leases, did you put all 10 there and are all 10 of them filled out the way they need to?" And so that human in the loop is kind of the same thing, and it's also like that for like for products. Like if you think about that in the product world, it's your quality assurance. Whenever a new technology is shipped, you go through the product scoping, you go through the development, you go through the testing, and then you go through the quality assurance. So, and then that is when you get like in your first launch to the public or like a user, so to speak. Sometimes you go into a beta to get feedback, but generally that's how it goes. This human in the loop, like with AI, it's not just replicating one simple workflow. It's not just, hey, this document gets sent out. It needs to fill in all the like have all these fields like in DocuSign, and then people just fill in the fields. Like it's, hey, this document is now gone out. It could be one of 100 documents, and we need you to, based on those 100 documents, we need to do these 10 different things in these different variations. And so you're not building that'd be 1,000 different workflows roughly. You're not building 1,000 different workflows. You're building criteria that it needs to follow. And so this human in the loop essentially becomes that quality assurance piece from when you launch something. Like, is it following all these workflows? Is it checking that every field was there in the right place? And if it's not, they train it. They say, hey, you missed it here, and this is why you missed it. And now I'm going to course correct you by I'm going to put that field in there. And then that next time, that training is now in the AI's brain. So to slowly level itself up. But if we just shipped things with just quality assurance like you did like in previous SaaS world, like you wouldn't have a very stable product, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah. It's a wild. It's so counterintuitive. Like it's so counterintuitive to think that the more advanced it is, the more you really need to think through the human checkpoint, and like the more you need to build around that. And it feels like if you don't have already a team of expert maintenance coordinators on staff and a team of property managers that ran property management companies, like I can't I just can't imagine. I can't imagine how a company that wasn't built around that to begin with can catch up to that level of oversight that's needed. Like, is there anything to that?
Say so, and where it comes from is like the devil's in the details. And
Yeah.
so like you could build like you could build a standard like work order analysis like agent. A good example is so Zillow for years has been a machine learning like AI generated. Like when you see the Zestimate, like that's looking at all this data around you. Like, do you have a pool, doors? I mean, like, sorry, number of beds, number of baths, square feet. Like, is it on a street? Is it not? It's looking at all these things and coming up with a recommendation for price. When I was getting my MBA, I took an AI course too, and they said, hey, try to replicate Zillow and tell us if it's good enough. And in about a day, we were able to get to something that was within 10% of Zillow. And so, but it was like, is that good enough? Like, if you're looking at $1 million house and you're off by 10%, like you're leaving 100 grand on the table. Like that's a big deal for a client. And like for an agent pricing something, like that's a big commission for them. That's a big impact. So being accurate is super important. Same thing could be said with work orders is like, hey, when this work order comes in, let's see, let me try to think of a good one. Okay, here's a good one. So in some areas of the United States, like HVAC isn't outside the home or in the basement. It's in the attic. And so when a work order comes in and says, hey, there's a dark spot of water on my ceiling, can somebody come take a look at it? Like most people would think like, oh, water, there's got to be pipes. Like I'm gonna get a plumber. But that could very easily be an HVAC related issue. It could also be a roofing related issue as well. So it's like in that interaction, how can you decrease that 10 to 30% error rate to say like, oh, because we're property managers, because like people have had so much experience in the space, because we have all these expert maintenance coordinators, like we can now train it to say, actually, in this scenario, like we need to do different things and ask it different questions and train it different ways to interact in this scenario to make sure that we're identifying if it's HVAC, roof, or pipe. Because we say, well, did it rain in the last 2 days? Like, no, okay, not roofing. Now we're down to HVAC and we're down to like plumbing. Like, oh, are you on like the main floors or a floor above you? Or is it just the attic above you? Narrowing it down the focus is what an expert eye would see. Like when I see David look at a work order, like he notices the minutia like so fast, and you're like, yep, that makes sense. Versus like if we have some other like new team member join or somebody like look at it with a complete like fresh set of eyes or like not as much experience, like they see something very different. And so that level of expertise, I think, is very, very important for getting to that next level and making it that much more accurate. And when we make it able to differentiate those things, then you get more customization as well. Because now we can actually have the property that has the HVAC in the ceiling. But if we couldn't identify the difference between those, we might send a roofer one time, we might send a plumber one time, we might send an HVAC person one time, and that's not a good experience overall. So yeah, I would say it's very important to one, you do need data, but at this point in time, everybody has access to LLMs that can do a ton of different things. But it's like how do you address the nuance in your specific industry is going to be what sets like the different AI companies apart from one another.
Totally. Totally, man. All right. Last question here. If there was something that, if you know, like, I feel like you're somebody that like saw this, you've been super pumped about this software and the impact of it. And now you've like been in the guts for it. It's been, I guess you've been here, what, like 9 months, something like that? Like a year? No?
Like a year, seven,
Get,
yeah.
getting there, man. Getting there. Out of all the, and you talk to a ton of clients a day, right? Like, what's the thing? If people could, if they're gonna believe what you say here, but this is like a new belief that they're gonna have to like get installed in. You don't have to like you don't have to have like fear of, all right, well, they're not really gonna listen to this, but you get everybody to like understand this one thing about what you see in this. Like what is the message that you would give to property managers that they don't yet understand about Vendoroo that like they have the highest upside in truly understanding?
Yeah, I would say at this point, now that we're as far into it as we are, is to trust the process and treat both like your sales, your onboarding, your account manager, like everybody like a consultant in your business and like a coach for like how this AI teammate can be the same. Like you don't, to me, both what I've seen with clients and also like what I see just with people using AI, is you try to shoehorn it into your process currently, and either that just exacerbates issues because now you're automating bad policies and practices, or it's not you could do it in a better way that optimizes multiple things. And so when I say trust the process, it really isn't just a flick of the switch and like now everything is gonna be hunky dory and fine. Like we've built this from the perspective of it needs to be the best it possibly can be for as many people as possible. But and when clients come to us like, well, this is built for me, and that is true, but you do have to interact with it and trust that process. Because I was telling David this earlier. I had one client come to me and say, like, I need it to do this specific thing. And I was like, are you sure? He's like, yes, like this is how I always do it. He's like, why? I was like, because the other 55 clients that I talk to every week, none of them do it this way because of X, Y, and Z. And he was like, huh, okay. So like we now have like some best practices across clients, and it is a process to like get things ramped up. Whether that's you knowing how to like train your AI teammate, that's you knowing like where the information's coming from. And so the biggest thing for me is trust the process and lean in. We've been talking about having an AI team lead. Like we believe that that's the new role that's going to be out there at pretty much any company. You're starting to see like head of AI, you're starting to see like chief AI officer, but
Yeah.
at the or junior levels, you're going to start seeing AI team lead, AI manager, you're going to like an AI project manager, like in these spaces, because they need to understand how their teammate works and how to actually implement change in their team.
We literally just wrote a newsletter about that. I don't know if you saw it. I published it yesterday
Yeah.
about that role. Thanks, man. Thanks for doing this, dude. I know that you're like the busiest guy ever, and I wanna get you going. I just want to say I've been just super impressed with working with you, man. I really enjoy it. Like your capacity. For me, the aha moment was when we were at the leadership offsite in Sonoma, and we're like brainstorming all this stuff, and all of a sudden I turn around and like everything that we had brainstormed, you had already turned into a presentation that we can then create to other leaders. Like I love you somehow have this like great capacity of efficiency that I'm the opposite of, and I love being around you because of that, because it just like reframes kind of like everything that I'm thinking of, like what I can get to, man. So I'm really pumped that you're on the team, man. I've loved working with you, and I appreciate you doing this, my friend.
Yeah, thanks. Always a fun time, Pablo.